Oh, you know, that's so mean.
Can we stand for the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just to start the meeting, we'll do a roll call vote. Present.
Mr. Myers.
Present.
Mr. Caroleo.
Here.
Mr. Rowland. Here. Mr. Beaver. Mrs. Calvin Caroleo. Mr. Shai.
Here.
Okay, so thank you for attending tonight's Board of Education meeting here in North Babylon. As a reminder, we have fire exits, front and sides. We also are following our new COVID protocols to ensure safety of all of those in attendance. Please be sure to wear your masks and seated 6 feet apart from non-household members, which means if you don't reside in the same household, please separate at least by 6 feet. We're going to speak up from our seat today. As you see, no podium and no microphone. We're going to speak from the seat, so we'll just have to stand up. And if we can't hear you, I can repeat the question. All of our microphones are streaming through YouTube, so we should be able to have a little bit more clearer sound. We're hoping that works for the people at home. So thank you again, everyone, for attending. So correspondence to the board. Board of Education received correspondence via district clerk. I'm not going to read them all out. There's a bunch there, but they are listed. We put this section now to let the public, anyone who sends me messages in, just to be aware. If you don't see it on here today, you know that it was not received, so therefore you can reach out. We will be discussing these, or we have not yet already, and getting back to everyone appropriately. Also need approval of the minutes of the Board of Education meeting from December 16th and January 6th. Need a motion? Motion, Dan Caroleo, second. Second, Heather. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Superintendent reports?
Yes. So I'm going to move down below. We're going to start the evening with our first presentation on cultural proficiency. Ms. Skillen and Mrs. Barnett are going to speak to you about the cultural proficiency work here in North Babylon. So one of our district goals this year was to create an environment that is proficient in cultural fluency of our community to ensure inclusivity of race, color, sex, religion, national origin, disability, age, sexual orientation, gender identity, socioeconomic status, as well as embracing new identities as they emerge, an area of study and interest. As a part of that, you'll see that there are many bullets that are involved in the work that we're doing here in North Babylon as a part of our district goal. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Skillen so that her and Mrs. Barnett can speak to you about the work that they've been doing throughout the school district.
So I first wanted to start off with discussing this idea of what is cultural proficiency. Now, Glenn just defined for us the goal. And we've been using this phrase cultural proficiency in the district because we felt that it was, it is a term that's out there that is well known, and we felt it really embraced the work that we've been doing here. So culturally proficient is defined as an ongoing process by which individuals and systems respond respectfully and effectively to people of all cultures, languages, classes, races, sexes, ethnic backgrounds, religions, sexual orientations, abilities, and other diversity factors, in a manner that recognizes, affirms, and values the worth of individuals, families, and communities, and protects and preserves the dignity of each. And that is the essence of the work we've been doing. So along with the goal, this is everything we do, we go back to this definition. So how did we start this story here in North Babylon of cultural proficiency? Actually started in 2017 when it was on a short list of things that the district wanted to make sure we addressed immediately. And we, at the request of district teachers, administrators, and community members, as Glenn and I were around and about the district, we kept hearing this theme of people wanting cultural proficiency and looking for that work and looking for us to embrace more of this. So we went out and we researched professional development providers to lead us in this work. And we went on a national search, and we tried to find someone who was research-based, someone that we felt could come in and be the expert in this area, and we've been very lucky in who we found. And then we started with professional development of stakeholders that began as a voluntary group, because to dive into this group as the first group, you have to be really open to this work. And the first group of people that we trained were Glenn and I, along with we had custodians, security guards, clerical, paraprofessionals, principals, directors, and teachers, all doing this work side by side together, and really kind of starting the work. Crystal at the time was a classroom teacher, part of the first group, and really dove into this work, and then became an administrator the following year and said, can this be one of the things that I work on? And I said, as a social studies person, absolutely. So to kind of give you an idea of our timeline of how things happened, in 2017-18, we had that first cohort that went through the Equity Institute, and Crystal's going to go through a little more of what that institute looks like in a bit. Then we had a continued training for this group because we were trying to build a foundational group that could begin the work for us, helping us with the other steps of the plan and helping us to recruit others. That led to us building equity action plans. We wrote those each, there's an elementary, a middle, and a high school plan, and you'll see those are ongoing works. In the fall of 2018, we did our first district equity walks, where we walked as a group, Glenn and myself, Crystal, our professional developer, the principal of the building, walked the building, and we looked at the lens of the work and to help us figure out where we wanted to go next. Then we did a second walk. We did the second cohort of Equity Institute training. And what was happening is people went out and started talking about, this was really cool training. I got a lot out of this training. And more teachers and paraprofessionals and clericals signed up for the training. In 2018, in the spring, we felt that we had enough people who were trained and felt confident in the work that they could start providing after-school professional development workshops on cultural proficiency and culturally responsive teaching as we started to go further. Crystal provides a lot of those workshops, and she does amazing workshops that teachers, administrators, and paraprofessionals all really want to be a part of. We then created our district equity action plan after we really kind of put all the work together. And in summer of 2018, we spent a lot of time, because one of the things that came up in our work was looking at diverse read-aloud books for our classroom libraries and school libraries. That was one of the biggest things we saw when we were doing the walk and did the walkthrough of each of the buildings was we didn't feel our books really reflected our students. So we did a lot of research. Crystal did a lot of research, and we used some grant funding to purchase books for all of our classroom libraries and school libraries to do that. And it's an ongoing process. We've been buying books every year. Fall 2019, our third cohort went through its training, more after-school professional development. And then we created a district and building administrators met together with the town of Babylon officials to discuss further collaboration. And Rich Schaefer has jumped on right on as a partner. And Mr. Duffin, who works with the town, has been a part of the work ever since then. And Rich really has been supportive and keeps saying, what are we doing next? He's been really a part of a lot of the work. Then in the fall of 2020, we had our fourth cohort of teachers. So Crystal, how many teachers at this point and paras and whatnot do you think have been trained administrators?
We have, the Paris teachers, we're at close to 160.
And just about every administrator in the district has been trained and has gone through it, every principal has. But then we took the work one step further at the high school and we said, you know what? Let's create a student equity team at the high school. Let's start bringing the students in. And Crystal worked with Jonathan and they created a team of students that wanted to be a part of this work. And we provided them the same training that they received by our professional development. We said we want them to get the work, and she provided a high school version of that training that Crystal did with them, and it was an amazing experience for the kids to be a part of that. We also then at the high school, they felt they wanted to create their own high school team. If we were going to work with the students, we wanted a parent team, and that began. in the spring of 2021, we saw how great it went with the high school students. We said, we're ready to go down to Moses. And again, voluntarily, we had people sign up, kids sign up. Crystal did a presentation, and they also then, this group, received the training by Natalie with this idea of building a 612 plan here and having these kids work together. In the fall of 2021, we now created a district-wide cultural proficiency task force that includes parents, teachers, students, town officials, administrators. Am I missing anybody? It's board members a part of this task force to now look at it as a preschool to 12 program and making sure that it's consistent throughout. So I'm going to have, Crystal's going to go through the work, because what happened is, as Crystal said, yes, I love this work, I said, here you go, Crystal. And Crystal's really been the lead on so much.
All right, thank you. So I wanted to just walk you through what some of the training we did looks like. And our major training is called the Equity Institute. It's a 3-day training, 4 days, 6-hour days, and it really is the foundation of all our work. So you have to remember that cultural proficiency, the foundation of cultural proficiency is all about creating community among lots of different peoples and perspectives, right? Our diversity here in North Babylon, this is our strength. So what can we do to maximize that diversity and to really, really highlight it and create an environment where every different child feels included and every different culture is celebrated. So to do that, we really had to walk through certain steps and certain understandings. The biggest part of the training to begin with is a self-reflective journey. Right? To really interact with cultures different than ours, you have to really look at yourself first. And you have to really take this self-reflective journey of who you are and where you come from and what are your experiences. So remember, culture is a really large, overarching concept. Our cultures are every little piece that makes it who we are. And who we are, in our perspective, absolutely affects our interactions with everybody. So you really have to start self-reflective. And once you take that self-reflective journey, then you start to apply some strategies into interactions and into building relationships across cultural differences. This here is the Cultural Proficiency Continuum, and it's at the heart of the cultural proficiency work. Because it's a tool that allows us to look at behaviors, look at thoughts and values, and kind of see where we are. So remember, this is a constant moving process. There is no day where you're just, okay, I'm done. I'm culturally proficient all the time. This is an ongoing self-reflective journey. So this continuum shows you different behaviors, and you start with cultural destructiveness, which is the idea that you want to destroy other cultures, right? So this is a very extreme end of this continuum. And you end with cultural proficiency. And in the middle, you have a lot of stopping along the way. Cultural incapacity is the idea that you maybe don't agree with other cultures. And then cultural blindness is this idea that we don't see all these different cultures, right? That everyone's the same. But we're not all the same, and that's part of what makes us wonderful, right? Is that we're all different. So now we enter cultural competence, and cultural proficiency. And as you see, by learning this, and by really being introspective, you learn more about yourself, and you learn better how to relate with others. So this is the cultural proficiency continuum applied to the climate and culture within our school. So when we're walking around the school, we really want to see inclusivity. We want to see the value of diversity. So what does that look like? And by giving us tools like this, we are able to look around and see where we are and make some of those assertions. Right, so cultural competence are practices that all staff and stakeholders communicate their shared values and beliefs. Right, this idea that we value diversity, we value individuality, and we're providing a space where everyone can be themselves and come together. And that is so important in a place like North Babylon, because one of the beautiful things about North Babylon is that we have so many different cultural representations here, so many different perspectives and walks of life. So what does this look like in a school system? What are we looking at? We look at our policies, we look at our practices, we look at our resources. We We want to know that the place that we are creating, that our schools are the best place for all of our children. That they are able to see themselves in our books, in our walls, in our lessons.
So I just wanted, just one thing that's in here that I think was so neat that happened with the training, is that because we train side by side, superintendent to, custodian, and clerical, teachers, administrators, there was this kind of leveling out of people feeling as if we were all equal in that room, and it empowered certain people when they saw things that didn't fit into our plan, when in their role, they now felt comfortable that they could speak out about it. And I always tell the story that there was a clerical that was trained. She looked at a book order that was coming in an elementary. She looked at the titles and she's like, I don't see anything in here that kind of aligns with the cultural proficiency work, and asked other people that were in the training with her, what do you think? And it led to us opening up to look at that list and help train the person who's ordering on some of the different things. So it's every person in the school system recognizing and seeing their role and how they can contribute and be part of it.
That's the importance of the Equity Institute, that it's not a teacher training. It's not a para training. It's a training for all of us together to come together to create the best culture possible for our students. And that's why now we even have students who are participating in it. This idea of how we engage across differences, what we assume and what we believe about each other, right? That's at the heart of cultural proficiency. Those are the questions you always need to be asking ourselves. Those are the questions we always need to be thinking when we are working to provide this to you. So how do we transform our professional practice? How do we move from one end to the other? What have we actually been working on? So we've been working on moving from a tolerance for diversity to a transformation for equity. There's a difference between, yes, we're all here and that's fine, to, yes, we're all here and we're better because of it. Yes, we're all here and we're constantly examining what we're doing and how we're doing it to make sure that all voices are heard and that everyone's included. So that brings us to our equity walks. Do you want to talk a little bit about equity?
So as I said, we did these equity walks where we walked through the building, and we basically took that rubric that you saw, the cultural competency rubric, with indicators underneath that would prove to us where things were with cultural proficiency. And we walked through hallways, we looked at entranceways, we looked at cafeterias, classrooms, classroom libraries, all the different spaces. And not only looked for the perspective of teaching spaces, but is it a welcoming environment for everybody who walks in? Are we translating things? Do parents feel welcome when they come to the door, no matter who they are? Do we be looking at bigger than just the cultural proficiency lens?
It's so eye-opening to do these walks because you have to come in as if you've never entered that building before. And for us, we're in and out of buildings all the time, and you don't really pick up on these details. But when you come in, and the professional development that works with us, when she comes in, she's looking at if someone is coming in, how do they feel? Do they know where to go? Is there a warm smile somewhere? Is there someone who's going to help them get what they need, right? Because that's the lens that, you get lost in the work and the day-to-day, but that's so important that our schools as centers of our community provide that welcoming environment for all of our students and parents and community members.
And one of the things that we started to do that we wanted to dig in deep on was the data. What is the data behind whether or not this impacts achievement? And we spent a lot of time, and still spend a lot of time, looking at our enrollments in different courses based on ethnicity and based on classification, E&L, special ed. We look at gender and whether or not there's an equity in classes on gender. And then ask the questions of, well, if it's not, well, why? What is the reason behind why one group of students may not be choosing to take this class? Is there something that we can look at and stay really in this inquisitive state of, the why questions and seeing if there's something behind it, or is it just that right now none of the girls like family computer science, whatever that might be. And then what we look at also is we've been looking at suspensions and referrals and our AP class selection. One of the interesting things in looking at referrals is not only what are students being written up for, what are the disciplinary things, but how are teachers writing those referrals, what language they use, really tells you a little bit more about the feeling of the work, and it helps us to then realize, okay, we need to do some more professional development in this area, we need to help in that, and look to see about our equity. Another really cool thing that's partly due to this and partly due to our ICT work, our special ed work, is we have a 4, out of a scale of 4, but the state of special education students graduating at a higher rate, and advanced regions diploma rates for special ed students increasing. And we're hoping that this inclusivity is helping students feel as if they can achieve and go further in their education and feel supported. So after doing the equity walks, this led us to creating our plans.
Yes, so we started out, like Ms. Skillen said, a group of, it was about 30 of us, all kind of different jobs, and we went through this training, and we went through the walks, and now we're like, okay, so what are we going to do? And Natalie, who's the consultant that works with us, was very clear in that you have to put pen to paper, right? Because if you're going to do something, you're going to do it. And we wrote our first building equity plans. And originally it was 1 per building. We sit down every summer with teachers who've been trained and the administrators of that building, and we update them. And we're constantly changing, they're a constantly evolving document. After about a year of the different buildings, we decided that we needed a district one to kind of centralize it. So I'm going to show you that you can actually access any of these on our website, but I'm just going to pull up the district one. Oh, I like it. Okay, so this is what our district equity action plan looks like, and they're all kind of similar. This is what our plan looks like. We create specific steps. We talk about who's in charge of those specific steps. And we look at the resources that we need to accomplish those. And how we're going to communicate them. And then we give some more detail. So this is our current district one. We're still working on raising staff awareness. We're looking at curriculums. And then activities with students and raising community awareness. So this was part of our plan, to come here and raise community awareness.
Yeah. And what we decided after the first year was having 5 different plans for the elementary was difficult to manage, and elementary really should be more consistent, even though most pieces are unique. So the elementary group of teachers got together and they took their plans and they made it into one elementary plan. So now we have an elementary, middle, and high school. And as Crystal said, and she's going to show you in a bit, this is all on the website for parents to access and community to access to see what does our work look like in the district.
So what are we working on this year? All right, so here's our long list. This is taken from all the different equity plans and what we're working on. One of the first things we did this over the summer, is like Ms. Gillen said, we consolidated all of 5 elementary plans into one. And we did that for consistency. We also did that because all those brains put together created a much more cohesive plan. So our elementary equity action plan gives each elementary school, everyone's got a monthly theme. Every month we do a theme. There's literature and lessons attached to that theme. So we're coming up on February, and our theme for February is kindness. Right? It links with our PS I Love You, it links with our SEL work, and there's read-alouds in each grade level that display the attributes of kindness and acceptance. In September, our theme was getting to know everybody, right? Because like I said, our diversity is our strength, right in front of us. So we had different read-alouds that were about getting to know, and we had getting to know activities.
And I just want to say, that's really important to understand because that's grade level appropriate, right? The idea of the under cultural proficiency of everyone getting along cohesively and celebrating each other really is about kindness, and it's about getting to know each other. Who are you? Beyond what your name is on your shirt, who are you? Tell us about who you are, what makes you up. And so it helps to create this environment of culture in that room, their own culture of a Woods Road or a middle school or a high school.
It also highlights the interconnectedness between this cultural proficiency work and our social emotional learning work, because they really are connected hand in hand. And we want our students to see that. And we pick themes specifically that highlight both of those initiatives and literature that's connected. And every grade level has its own set of literature connected to the theme. So kindergarten class is not reading the same books that the 5th grade class is. It's all different across the grades. And you'll see how you can actually access it and look at it. We increase our student equity team training. at the high school and at the middle school. We train more students at the middle school, and we train more students at the high school. The high school students are working, they meet monthly in a club fashion, right? They have an advisor. It's an actual full club this year. They meet once a month, and they're making lots of kinds of things that the kids want to do and take part of. At Robert Moses, we are looking to set it up the same way, with a club and an advisor. We have our high school parent equity team that meets every other month, and they're also working on presentations to the high school PTA right now. And classroom libraries. So we started that summer, we haven't stopped, we're constantly updating, and we take a really inclusive approach. So it's not just me buying books that are linked with cultural proficiency. I sit with the ELA director, I sit with the school librarians, I sit with classroom teachers. We make sure that our lessons are connected, right? So it's not just this random read aloud book, it's the anchor text for your reader's workshop. It's what's driving your social studies lesson. It's an SEL read aloud, and we make sure that they're all aligned and all connected. So it's not a time out for cultural proficiency. It's something that's interwoven within our day and our curriculums. We have a multi-faith forum coming up in May for our 6th graders and 9th graders. We did that for the first time last year. We worked with the Long Island Interfaith Council, and we had representatives from Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism come in and share with the students the beliefs of their religion. And they sat for questions. And the kids asked lots and lots of questions. It was really nice. They were so open, and the kids were able to really ask about anything that they had about religions that we learn out of a textbook. And now instead of learning out of a textbook, we have real live people coming in to tell us the day-to-day. We focus on our Heritage Month celebration. So that's been a big focus of my work the past couple weeks. I've been working with elementary principals and elementary teachers and middle school and high school to what are we going to do now to celebrate African American History Month that's coming up. And we've come up with some elementary plans. We're going to do a little bit of study of the Harlem Renaissance. We're going to look at some African American authors. And we have themes now with the different grade levels to have a more complete study and experience.
And I want to just interject again, I'm sorry, but Crystal, what she does when it comes to holidays or things that we acknowledge within school is always sure to provide teachers with lengthy resources, lesson examples, videos, read aloud, resources for themselves to become perhaps better educated, whether it be Martin Luther King Day, whether it be Juneteenth, whether it be Columbus Day, so that they're prepared to answer questions that may come up that may be controversial on that topic, and maybe look at a new perspective to go a little deeper in their instruction, and not maybe do the same thing they've done for every Columbus Day. Look for other avenues to teach it.
I go building to building, and I present the resources. I work with teachers. I was at DeLuca for most of it today doing that. I was at NGD yesterday. And we don't just want to say, do this. We want to provide research-based strategies. We want to provide literature that is representative of our curriculum, of our New York State standards. And we want to provide the training in order to have the knowledge, right, and the skills to interweave these lessons and highlight different things. We have a partnership with the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center. We've had that for a few years, and they come in, this year they're coming into our 6th grade classes, in a couple weeks actually, and they do a presentation called The Power of Words, and it's all about how important it is to understand that words hurt, and you can hurt somebody just with your words. It's not about physical, right? And we have to acknowledge that and be aware of how we speak to each other and how we talk about each other, because we want to not hurt, right? We want to promote inclusivity and kindness. And then 7th grade is going to do Deconstructing Symbols of Hate. So they're going to take that foundation they got in 6th grade with the power of words, and we're going to talk about different symbols. Historically, they are going to look at, the Nazi symbol and different things that can project hate and lack and tolerance in a written way, but that's not your traditional words. We want to work with the Holocaust Museum to promote tolerance and acceptance. And then we have continued professional development. So we are planning on having the Equity Institute this year. We're also on year 2 of our culturally responsive teaching cohort, and those are run by Natalie, who's our professional development consultant, And we do so many one-hour workshops. Between me and the teachers, we run workshops on culturally responsive teaching, on understanding bias, on meeting the needs of Muslim students, all different things. And the more that come up, the more we're going to do. We talk about facilitating difficult conversations and talking about these topics in your classroom as well. We do workshops with that too. Okay, so that's our work. That's what we're working on this year. Just a little bit. All right. So while we've been busy doing all this work, eventually New York State caught up to us, and they said this kind of work is a good idea, it's necessary in New York. So New York State has been working on the New York State Culturally Responsive Sustaining Framework. And it's a state document that is all about diversity, equity, and inclusivity. It's all about promoting environments where everyone is welcome and everyone is represented. So we have sat down to examine some of this framework, and we see that the work we've been doing with cultural proficiency is 100% aligned with this framework. And that the work we've been doing, looking at our buildings, looking at our data, doing our professional development, looking at our curriculums, is all already aligned. So I'm not going to tell you that we're done, because it's an ongoing process, but that we had a pretty good head start, and that we were in this even before they said, you need to be in this. So the premise of their framework is those 4 different topics: creating a welcoming and affirming environment, high expectations and rigorous learning, inclusive curriculum and assessment, and ongoing professional development.
And I want to point out that this is a framework from the state. It's not a state-written curriculum. So our curriculum is written here by our teachers based on our work that is aligned with the state's framework. I just want to make sure that this is not something where the state's saying you must teach this lesson. It's making sure that these things are highlighted. So we just pick.
Right, we get to pick, and we pick what's aligned with our standards, with the curriculums that we have, the experiences we're creating for our students.
So one of the great things that Crystal, that we asked her to do is, can you take all this great stuff and make a website for everybody? So Crystal worked on this, and this is linked right onto our district website. And so again, anybody can access it at any time. And she really spent a lot of time making sure that our work was well represented on here. So Crystal, I know those are 2 things you want to highlight.
Yeah, so on this website, this is the main page, and we start with our vision and our mission, because it's important that everything's always aligned, right, to our district vision, mission, and goals. And now what we have here is an information center for our community, right? What are our demographics? And we have that up, because it's important. It's important to know the diversity that we have in our community. Right, so we have them all broken down, and that timeline, that's the same one that Ms. Skillen showed us. We have some definitions as to what is equity, right? And then there, if you want to click there, on the district equity plans, that's where we were saying that you can access all the plans. They're all there for you. So that's our district plan, and I'll show you where to get the building plans, but it's all there for you. Scroll
And you
down.
see, Chris also has tabs in there with resources for teachers, students, and parents. So if people want more information or to go a little further to understand the approach we're taking and the work we're doing, to get a full picture of it, there's resources for them to read that are research-based.
That's where you can get our building plans. And they're all linked on there. So the elementary, middle, and high. We summarize our professional development, and that culture responsive framework is on there as well, if you're interested in taking a look at that. And then what Ms. Gillen was talking about was right there on those blue buttons, we have additional resources. So if you're interested, if you have a different question, we have resources for parents, for students, and for teachers. All different kinds of resources.
And this is a live site. So as Crystal's working with teachers and administrators, and we're working together as a team with Len and I, we are constantly updating when we find something new, something interesting that we want to put up here as a resource. So it is live and living.
And that's for the teachers. I'm always making book recommendations, article recommendations. different resources for their classrooms.
So some of the outcome of we've seen of this work that is not necessarily qualitative work that we've seen or anecdotal is we've seen, like I said, more staff members coming forward and looking for ways to be more inclusive and looking at our system. We have a group of high school students who have asked for a space for them because they have designated prayer times, they're Muslim, and could they have space, they felt confident and comfortable to come forward and ask if there were a way that we could accommodate their religion. We have teachers that are seeking us out or seeking out different people, asking how, I've never had a student who is Muslim, I've never had a student who is Sikh, I've never had a student who is Asian, I have a student who is non-binary, can you help me, because I want to be supportive. So they're opening up and letting us know where they feel they need some support. And we have enough staff on hand right now that feel confident and comfortable in it, that people know who the go-to people are to look for that support or know where to reach out to get some more support if they need it. So we are seeing a shift of people thinking through the lens of cultural proficiency when they're designing their work and looking at the whole school culture climate.
I was saying about the meeting I had with the high school equity team as well.
Yep, so I know that was a great meeting. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, so I had an opportunity to meet with the high school student equity team for about 2 hours right before the holidays, and I have to tell you, it was probably one of the most powerful and engaging opportunities I had with students in the district in my 7 years here. We came up with 5 very tangible outcomes. What I'd love to hear from the kids is that they were saying they were no longer interested in hearing the rhetoric and the words, and they wanted to see more action. And what actions would I be willing to take as a superintendent so that they could see what they were doing was important? And we were in there and we set 5 actionable items by the end of the year. For example, the high school students are interested in sitting in on screening interviews as an observer to see the types of people that apply for jobs in the district. Are there educators and paras and whoever works here, bus drivers that represent what they look like, what they believe in, and that they identify with. And there were several items that they were very interested in that I'll be following up with them on. Some things that can definitely be accomplished within this school year that they can see that with the work they're doing is important and that they're being heard.
They're being empowered, I guess is the best way. And I know both principals have said that their teams have come forward with things that the kids have noticed in their halls and had questions about. A particular poster that maybe people didn't look at in a particular way that they now feel confident asking questions about, or a book in a class to have these conversations about why it's something they make them feel uncomfortable or why they think it's awesome and they want more of, which is really what we want, right? To empower the kids to feel that the school is theirs and they can make those decisions. So so I know it's been a little bit longer than normal, but we wanted to make sure that you really understood the full scope of the work that we were doing, and that, like we said, this is an ever-evolving plan. This is the beginning. Crystal and I meet often, and we're like, oh, we need to do this and we need to do that, and teachers are always coming to us with new ideas of where we can expand this work, which is neat. Does the board have any questions?
Great work. Great presentation. Thank you for going through the details. It looks like an amazing start. Obviously, it's not a start recently. It's been going on for some time. So
1 year ahead of the state. They stole our framework.
it's a bad idea.
And I have to say that the staff developer that we're using, Natalie, is excellent. And we work our first Long Island school district. And now there are at least a half a dozen or a dozen school districts that are now using her because of the work we're doing, and they're hearing and they're want to come in, and we're getting phone calls from principals and assistant superintendents and directors, and she, which is neat to see that it's expanding out from there.
She actually was able to branch off from the company she was working with and is now able to run her own agency with her belief systems and her way of running and operating this type of professional development. And she's in many districts that locally that and in Nassau County asking us, as recommendations of the type of work she does.
Thank you. I'm not going to ask a long question. I just have to read quick things.
Sure.
But it'll be fast.
Okay.
You mentioned the
growing, and that's a great program with great distinction. And Natalie, our consultant, has worked in helping schools develop that program. She's also worked with the Anti-Defamation League and some of their curriculum resources. So we've begun to have those conversations because it is a good program and a great distinction for our schools, definitely.
And because we're in January with the National Holocaust Remembrance, there's names, not numbers. And I don't know if it's something that is kind of on the same thing. I'll email you. That's also pretty cool. And question, did the cafeteria come up in the walls? I don't know if I missed that.
They did.
Okay.
Yeah, they came up. They came up in a couple of different ways. They came up in why do students make the choice, and there's actually a couple of books written on that about, cafeterias and why they're sitting in certain ways, as well as whether or not the cafeteria was a place that students were proud of, right? And felt like was their space and comfortable in.
Whether they could see themselves in it, in the cafeteria, whether it was the kind of environment that they felt was the relaxing lunch that they should have when they're connected.
And one of the things that Crystal did as a result of some of that work is she's been providing professional development not only to our staff, but to our bus drivers and to our cafeteria aides to make sure that everybody's using the same language and understands the district's philosophy.
So we just started that, right? We started.
I'm really thinking about when we serve.
Oh, food service.
Oh,
Having more diverse menu. You know, that didn't come up.
That didn't come up. That's interesting.
That is something we definitely should look at.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I thought maybe
Comes up to my house.
No, but you brought up the Muslim student and
Yes.
students. I never, that's why I just thought about that.
Yeah, and what was neat about the beginning of some of the Muslim student training was that it was a staff member who went through the cultural proficiency training, who would not have been somebody in her role that she would have been a staff developer. So she worked with Crystal and said, I'm Muslim, and I do see some things, I really would like to educate people, and they team together. And so, here's someone in a totally different role, wanting to make sure she knew she had something to do to educate people, and he did that.
And she's been so fantastic and giving us recommendations for the PDs and the read alouds, and now we work with the Interfaith Council, and we've had somebody from there who gave us guidance on the prayer rooms. But the food is interesting. No, that's
You gotta add that in. 2023.
I'm sure Mrs. Isabella would be open, if it's on the list of dietary.
Right.
Just a couple of things.
Sure.
Echo, fantastic presentation. I love the fact that staff is looking to be involved. I mean, and it won't succeed without them. You guys know that, and thank the staff for, having the courage to become involved and do that. And I love the thought process of we're never done. We're never done. This is constantly learning and constantly evolving. And I know that from you shared some of the equity walks and the improvements that have happened since you started this program. Crystal has said, this is amazing progress in a year and 2 years that she's seen. So thank you. And keep up the great work.
Yeah, and that was one of the, I think Crystal and I both felt really validated when we did the equity walk again this fall. And Natalie had not been in our halls, right, because we were close to COVID, and she hadn't walked our halls, and she saw things that she was like, wow, I can't believe how much growth. And it's not just somebody threw something up because we were coming through the building. It wasn't just posted in the page. You could see it ingrained in what we were presenting and what was going on. In particular, she saw significant growth in this building.
This one is together, which is nice. Very, very nice to hear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal.
So we're going to transition right into our Upk discussion in order to stay on the timeline that we set earlier in the school year regarding making decisions regarding universal pre-K for next school year. We have some additional information that Kim's going to share regarding our Upk Parent Interest Night, the collection of our data so far for next year, and some ideas and suggestions and data for you, the Board of Education, so that you can make some decisions about moving forward.
Thank you. And I'd like to acknowledge Mrs. Lark is here, principal of MGB, where the pre-K program is is housed. And just a quick summary for everyone, we have 72 students, 4 sections of pre-K running at MGB this year. The program has been very successful. Mrs. Lark and the teachers that are running it have done an excellent job. It's probably one of the most fun places in the district to be. There's always singing, laughing, and lots of learning happening in that hallway. So we're excited about how well the program is going. These are some slides. I'm not going to go through them. They're here for reference. Carrie and I shared these slides with you in October about the projected cost over time of the current program we have. And if you remember, the funding sources are coming from the state for the program. That's why we started with supplement from our general fund. Frank shared with me the first run of state aid numbers, which included our UPK money, and it looks like our money is the same, that there was no increase or decrease in our grant funding for next year. And this is how we went through and broke down where the money is coming from. $511,000 this year were taken from the UPK grant, $15,000 out of the stimulus grant, and we projected out where we were going to cost out, how we were going to find the money. Currently, we have 18 students per section. We have our current program 4 sections, so that's 72 students that are here, as I said. And then what I have here for you is at every section that we add, how many more students can participate in the program. So if we had 5 sections, there'd be 90 students, 6, 108, 7, 126, if we had 8, 144. And the thing that I also want to point out is, according to the grant and the state regs, we always have to give 10% to our outside provider. 10% is 10 students. And our partner is Foster Price Pre-K, and I've been there, I've been visiting the program, working with them, and they're doing a nice job. So we always will have those 10 spots there, but it is a separate program, but that's their program that we supervise and oversee to make sure they're in line with the state. But it's an independent program, they have their own process for students. You have to apply there to be there, but those 10 spots are saved only for North Babylon students. That is, they give 10% of the grant funds for that. One of the things that part of the partnership is we assist them with professional development. So they participate in those after-school PDs. They have access to all of our catalog. They participated in conference day. The director works with Carrie. The staff has come over and visited the program, and so that we can help, and it's a mutual agreement here. So we had, Carrie and I had a parent information night on January 13th. We had about 70 parents in attendance at that meeting. And right after that meeting, I put out an interest form, and more than 131 people responded. But of the people that responded, 131 of them are interested in having their child participate and meet the criteria to participate next year. Okay? Just to kind of give you where we were when we did this last year, we had 115 people apply last year, and so just kind of have an idea of where we were with the interest. This is the cost to open a section, and this is the big thing that I shared with the board before, but I kind of summarized it down for you. This would be the general fund impact per year, per sections. So, for instance, in 22-23, we're projecting, our current program is going to cost the general fund $72,000. That would be our contribution. If we open 5 sections, it'd be $90,000. And the reason why it's not that big of an increase is because we did not take the full allotment of the UPK grant last year because we didn't meet the number of students. We weren't ready to open that big. We will now take the full allotment, so there'll be more grant funding coming in. 6 sections would cost general fund $190,000, and so on and so forth too. If we wanted to open the 8 sections, it would be $399,000, and that's the projection out. It's all estimate, and this is really the cost includes the cost of the teachers, their salaries, their benefits, the paraprofessional, because every room has one paraprofessional, and their benefits, and the cost of a cafeteria aide. But remember, we have 1 cafeteria aide split between 2 rooms. So we have 5 sections, we have to hire 1 cafeteria aide. But if we have 6 sections, I don't have to hire another cafeteria aide because they're split. And then this is our tentative timeline. And one of the things we talked about, and the UPK committee met in the beginning of January, discussed as well, is the biggest request we had last year from parents was, please do the registration process in January, February, because that's when the pre-K programs around the area start to do their tours and start to open up their enrollment, and they really would like to know if they get into this program, then that saves them there. So that's why we backed it up to that. So when I had the meeting the other night on the 13th, I told the people in the meeting that I was bringing their interest back to the board meeting tonight, as we discussed before, to have a conversation about how many seats, how many sections would be open next year before we open the application, so people have an idea. So my question to you is, how many sections would you like us to run next year?
I like to see baby steps. Maybe you had one section this year, one section. Well, actually, if you had one, you multiply it two, it's only $20,000 difference. They had the second one, I think, this year, correct?
So it's 18 to add to the fifth section.
So if we
Yeah, if you had, I'm saying one step, but if you had the second one right away, it's only like $20,000.
no, it's a movie another $100,000.
I'm sorry, if we had 5 sections, that's the 20%, and that's the 20,000, and that's because of the grant funds.
Right.
Everything after that, and that's the important thing to recognize, once we do 5 sections, we have exhausted our grant funding. So everything at that point would be the cost of the general fund. And I will be looking through grants to be able to buy the supplies and the room, so that we can find other ways, avenues to do that. But the salaries of the teacher, parent, cafeteria aide, and their benefits would be 100% general fund. That's why it's such a huge jump between 5 and 6.
Kim, two questions. One space-wise, and then you did.
Karen and I discussed it, and we could do the full 8 sections. It would take some reorganizing, and this probably, we discussed this the best year probably to do it because of the fact that they're having work done in the building this summer, so teachers are going to have to pack up anyway. But we felt comfortable that we could easily do 6 sections, if that is what you wanted, with up to 6 with very little change, right? Carrie, you felt that confident in that?
And last year, we had 131 that, no, I'm sorry, 115 applied. How many expressed interest? Right?
You know, I don't have that number right here for you, but I'm going to tell you, it was much more than 115.
I'm trying to see, like, the 131 responded this year. How many will really apply?
Yeah, so I will tell you that we, of the 115 that applied, Carrie and I were talking about this today as well, everybody went on a wait list. And as somebody drops out, we call them and say, hey, you're next on the wait list, do you want to get in? We've had probably somewhere between, we couldn't get the exact, I couldn't calculate it exactly today, but 10 or 12 students this year that have left the district, so that we've been able to offer a spot. And when you're talking about a class size of 18, that's a lot of kids, right? That's almost a full section of kids. I just want you to take that in consideration.
It says 21 on there, but that's supposed to say 12. 21.
Well, I'm sorry, 21 students have been offered a spot, but that from the wait list, but there were only 12 spots that have opened, meaning other people declined.
Above the 72. I mean, above the 72.
Yes.
Correct.
The original 72, there were some people who withdrew due to COVID restrictions.
And we had to people move, and just different circumstances have changed, and we made that promise to the people on the wait list that, if you wanted to stay on the wait list, if the spot became available, we would make it available for you.
How many kindergarten students do we have on average?
So that's a hard question because the last 2 years haven't been great, but we typically are somewhere between 350 and 380, and the last 2, I think our first in kindergarten are around 280, 290 now.
Yeah, kindergarten, I believe when I looked at the number the other day, was about 290, he's right. That's why we went to the 144, because we thought, okay, half, in speaking to colleagues in other districts, they're saying that the interest, that programs that have been established for a long time, has been about half or less of the then kindergarten class. So I said that would maybe be a stable number if we went max. And based on the interest and the number of kids that dropped out, Glenn and I spent some time talking about what did we look at.
I like the idea of kind of what Carol said, just take a step. So let's say we start at 4, and go to 6, and then 8. If that kind of makes sense to me.
A step in, if you want to do that gives us the opportunity, Frank, Glenn, and I, to work together to kind of come up with a long-term plan for budgeting, right? That allows us, if we know that's what you want to do, to plan appropriately, because that would mean, obviously, some cuts someplace else.
And you could also look at, if you were to put 2 in this year, right, and go from 4 to 6, you could do an alternating year. So you may put 6 in this year, skip next year, and then go to 8 if we can come up with a budgetary plan. Because if you look at sustainability, by 2025-26, you're hitting the budget at $500,000 to sustain 8 sections. But we also don't know if through the federal government, are they going to increase the federal funds? Because it is one of the major talking points still. So we didn't have money before, we got $699,000. Maybe if we go to 6 now, and in the next 2 years, maybe that'll go to $800,000. And then it covers the 6 classes, and we could say, all right, we're only hitting the budget on the 7th class now. So I think if you put 2 in, because I think it makes it splitting the cafeteria aid, setting up a schedule with even numbers is easier within the building. We have the space for 6 where they'll all be in the same area as UPK kind of center. If we could go 6 and then say, all right, we're going to 6, digest the 6 into the budget, see what we can do for our grant funds to kind of pull some of that 190 out of there and put it in some grants, other grants, and then next year have a pause and then look at maybe the year after of adding more.
So are we seeing like an increase with interest in comparison to last year?
The interest is probably comparable. I would say we had more people last year at our information meeting than we did this year. But I was so surprised as soon as Carrie and I opened the interest form, we had immediately 45 parents in there, like within 20 minutes.
So
I was like, yep.
interesting, what I found when you were sharing the data with me was that there were many more who went to the online interest last year, and then not all of them applied. This time, we had 70 at the interest, but had 100 and something apply. So I think the word is out there that I don't need to go to the interest because I already know that my neighbor, my sister, my whatever, his kid is in it and loves it, and I want my kid in it.
And we did tell the parents that the presentation, we had a couple of phone calls, was online, so people could see it and view it. And we've been getting emails from people who weren't at the meeting with particular questions.
And I'm thinking the number may be a little bit more stable, because I think Matt's point is, I think the number of people that were interested and was much higher, and then kind of people backed out when they kind of saw the structure more, like how long the day was. And I think maybe that this number of interest is a more solid number of people who really want to be in, and it may be closer to the amount of applications that get filled out.
6 sectional also gives us, and Carrie and I spoke about this at length, more flexibility right now for the impact of MGB. If you double the program right now and have another 72 4-year-olds in the building, that definitely is going to have an impact in that building, just culturally. Now, of course, Carrie's awesome and it's going to be fine. She's been doing a great job with that program. But you may not see her next year because she may be
We're talking about
the drops off, yeah.
We have to talk about drop-off, because if you're adding 36 more cars, right, and drop-off and pick-up is very timely now. We also know that eventually, when the central office isn't where it is, there's going to be the Jardine entrance, which will help. Also, as a part of our presentation towards budget, when we get to budget season, we have been talking as a central office team, we may need to go back to split schedule elementary schools. And earlier, remember when during, not this year, last year, we had 2 different times. It saves us a considerable amount of money on busing. Yes. And we're spending a lot of money on busing by having all 5 elementary schools go at the same time, because then we can't do the middle school late runs, and we're contracting those out, and they're very expensive. They're $10,000 a month per bus. So if we split our elementary schools, the elementary school buses that do the early morning schools can do our middle school late buses. They're done with their elementary runs in time to get to the middle school, which then allows us to back off that extra outside cost for transportation. We are in the planning stages now. This is the first time it's ever been said out loud outside of my office, just so you know. Nobody else has heard it other than at this point, but I kind of want to give some insight as to how this, MGB may end up being a late elementary school so that the UPK can go in before the regular kids go and get dropped off, so that it's not happening at the same time, and then they get picked up before the K-5 kids leave, or vice versa. But we would work on that to try to help with the amount of cars that are coming, because there is no busing for that program.
And then we also just have to think logistically with the special areas. Now, we've mentioned before, we are not required by the state to provide music and art and PE and library, but we felt as a district it was very important to have students have those. So Kerry has worked creatively within her schedule and with the director of fine arts and PE to find these little sections to do that. They aren't getting as much PE as every other student because of the way the schedule is, but we have to play with that schedule district-wide too to see if there's little dangling pieces in different places that we can pull and capture, not to increase. But if we go to 8, I don't see how we could not increase our PE if we felt that was important to still have.
And also, how's the movement within the program, like with a certain percent, and in September now, do you see that the movement within the classes are pretty much the same?
As far as enrollment, it's that 10 to 12 students have left. And every time an opening becomes available, Carrie gets onto that wait list and calls the next person on the wait list and offers them the spot. It's time consuming. Yep.
Well, it's not that many, only because some people did original pullout, and we went to the wait list right away, for about 5 or 6 children there. So the movement is more around 6 children who still do that.
So the students who are on the wait list were actually able to get a spot?
Yeah.
5 or 6 were actually able to get a spot before the school year even started.
And
Those
then
were the
while
fun
school's been
movements.
going on, 5 or 6 left since as the school year's gone on, and other kids have given an opportunity.
Okay, so is the main consensus is 6 sections?
Yes. I guess my only concern is when we're making projections and we're hiring the teachers, we have on there that it would be about $75,000 for a BA, step 1. And when we look at the cost just for this year, it's, those 4 sections, it's about $25,000 to $30,000 more per teacher than the projections. And I think that's just something that...
The difference is that we were looking at new hires for the new sections, and I gave you the actual budget, the actual expenses, and one of the teachers that's in the program is a long-time veteran teacher, so her salary is significantly higher than a first-year teacher would be.
Would you be able to provide the board with the people that were 4 teachers that were hired?
Oh, sure.
Were they BA step 1, or were they master's?
Well, what it was is we had teachers that were excess.
Then we accessed 8. So really,
So again, the projection.
The projection is based on new hires, right? We're based on, from here, because we didn't have anybody else on our Pell list, would be a new hire. And what I gave you was, in October, was the actual expense of what the people that are in the rooms right now cost.
Absolutely. No, I understand. I'm
Okay.
just saying, when we're thinking about doing the programs, this is the absolute minimum amount of money that it
minimum
costs.
teacher,
Yeah.
yes, minimum teacher amount,
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
And then also for the specials, I know that's not calculated in, the expense of that with the library.
Yep, and that's, we need to look at the schedule as a K-12 schedule with Jason and Kim to see if there's, like I said, the little dangling pieces maybe in other buildings that maybe can fill in, because we don't need that much, but we may need a little bit here and there, and it also depends.
In our preliminary
Yeah.
review, although maybe it may not be the same amount of each area in each room, like maybe one room's getting phys ed, art, library twice, and music once. Another class may get music twice, not art, and get phys ed. You know what I'm saying? We're going to be playing with and maybe coming up with a rotating schedule, because I believe we can reach 6 without increasing any specials by grabbing some additional open time that may exist. And I also am working with Dr. Kim. If it's a non-COVID year next year, we can increase our lesson group sizes, because right now they're very small and taking up a significant amount of teaching periods, because you can't have the wind instruments in so many kids in a room. So my hope is in a non-COVID, we could look at some of the lesson groups, because they are smaller, but they needed to be smaller this year because of COVID. So there's kind of like moving targets here, but I believe we wouldn't have to add additional time into the special areas to cover 6 sections. 8, I would say you guys not cover 8. We would have to look at increasing certain areas, but I don't think we will need to in 6.
We just have, it's going to take Glenn Barber and I with Dr. Kim and doing really some creative look at if we have.
And Terry is an expert in scheduling. She does a great job, so we'll start there.
Yeah, there may be some things we haven't looked at before that we need to be able to capture.
Next question?
So 6 sections is what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, I appreciate that. And we'll get the applications will be out then tomorrow by the end of the school day.
Do the clocks go back? Do the clocks go back to now? Okay, well that's exciting. All right, so public participation. This section gives the Board of Education the opportunity to recognize residents who wish to raise a question, make a brief statement on agenda items only, 5 minutes from your seat. Any questions at this time?
Hi, my name is Liz Papaleo. I live at 101 Lakewood Avenue, Babylon, New York, 1702. I am here really to ask a major question is, why is there not live streaming for grades 6 through 10? And how can we even be justified, as I just watched now, to increase PK classes when we can't even provide adequate teaching to the kids that we already have? For example, my son...
That's not an agenda item, so that can be spoken about in the next section, just not at this section. So I'm not to cut you off.
But did you talk about UPK?
We talked about UPK, yeah, but not live streaming K through 12.
But how can you pay for something for UPK and agree to something like that without taking care of what we already have?
I mean, again, this is the time for that question. We can ask it later. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so policy, recommend the board approve the following policies for first reading, none at this time, and second reading, none at this time, sorry about that. Personal action, resignations, terminations, and leaves of absence. The superintendent of schools recommends the Board of Ed approve the resignations, terminations, leaves of absence, and or position abolitions in accordance with applicable provision of education law and civil service law, as in Schedules 1 and 1A. Need a motion? Motion, Dan, second. Second, Heather, all in favor? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Appointments, tenure, salary changes. Superintendent of school recommends the Board of Education approve the employment, appointments, tenure appointments, and salary changes in accordance with applicable provisions of education law, the civil service law, as cited in Schedules 2 and 2A. Need a motion? Motion, Bob, second. Second, Dan, all in favor? Aye. Any abstention? Motion carries. Omnibus A through F. Need a motion? No. We're just going A through F. We're going to do G separate. Yep. Second. So first is Dan, second is Heather. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any abstentions? Motion carries. We're going to be doing G separately, so contracts and service agreements. Recommend the board approve the following contracts and service agreements for the 2021-22 school year between North Babylon and Top Grade Inc. and Almost Home Program 22-23 school year. All in favor? No, I need a motion, excuse me. Motion. The motion is Dan, second.
Second.
Second is Bob. All in favor? I have one abstention, which is Keisha, for a reason that she has given to the district clerk. So that's posted, and everyone else? All in favor? Aye. Okay, motion carries. Consultant agreement, mentor coach contract for Neil Lederer. We need a motion. Motion is Dan, second is Bob. All in favor? Aye. Any abstentions? Motion carries. We have a sick bank memorandum in agreement with the North Babylon Teachers Organization. I need a motion. Motion is Heather, second. Second is Bob. All in favor? Aye. Any abstentions? Motion carries. We have one more. This is submission of APPR hardship waiver resolved upon the recommendation of superintendent. The Board of Education hereby approves the submission of education law. I'm not going to read all that, but I need a motion. Motion Dan, second. Second Bob, all in favor? Aye. Aye, motion carries. We got some reports. Audit committee report. Is there one?
No.
Perfect. Building inspection committee report. Any meetings? I know the holidays.
So right now, we are currently in the process at our last meeting. The committee had asked the district to look at individual security vestibules, which would be those small, independent vestibules outside the doors. Instead of looking at creating the man trap design that we were looking at previously because of the cost. Currently, Matt Backus is pricing out those vestibules for the building committee. He's working with the architects and a company. We're going to gather that information and we're going to provide that to the building committee after we get that information from them.
What phase of the bond is that in?
So it's not, it's that smart schools money that's sitting on the side. The problem is that that security aspect is holding up our technology part of the student management system, the visitor management system that goes along with that, and the additional cameras that we were looking at. So Dan, who's back there, did a full evaluation with an outside company of our security systems, our cameras and our technology, and has come up with 3 quotes, which are like, here's what we would need minimally, here's really where we should land, and here's if you really want to, you know, go all the way to the top. And we need to see where the cost of these security vestibules come in so that we can know how much money we have to do the camera and visitor management system. When we got the security vestibule, the man traps, we were told they were going to be coming in at about $500,000 total district-wide, and the estimate came in at $3.2 million. We only have $1.1 million. So our thought was 500 was going to go to those, and 600 was going to go to the technology aspect that we were looking for. With those coming in so high, we're looking at this other avenue and then see what that price range comes in at so that we can then make a presentation to the board on an alternative that we can afford to get both things done.
Awesome.
All right?
That is way behind.
I'm on it.
Legislative does not come together yet. And,
The other thing is we need to set up a meeting for us to go through what we want to do with CO and where we want to put that and what we're talking about with the property. And then we're waiting for, are we still waiting for something from?
No, so I see on the board discussion the potential property purchase. That was one thing that we discussed at our last meeting. I just left it out here, considering I saw it there.
Okay. Thank you. Cool. All right, anyone on communication, anything? Over the holidays, I don't think so, right?
We were supposed to have that policy meeting and communication today, but that has to be rescheduled.
Okay.
Legislative committee is March.
All right, good. All right, so now board discussion topic, as Bob wants to discuss is potential property purchase. So I think Glenn has some information.
So I can just do a summary for you. So we have looked at 2 properties that were available to us. The one on Deer Park Avenue next to Sonic, which was that piece of property that was narrow and really long in length that went all the way back probably I think 700 feet back or so. That property was viewed by the building committee. We worked with our real estate agent. The market value is around $700,000 to $750,000 for that property. The second property we looked at was on Phelps Lane, the church property. We met with the classes, I believe they're called, of the church, and the church is willing to subdivide that property and sell us an acre of that property. We had our architect come out to see what would that look like, what area of the property would that look like. I provided you guys a drawing, I think at the last board meeting, I had a red outline of the 1 acre of property that the district would look at, and it would be the most eastern part of the property line to about approximately midway to the church area. The church would then maintain from that area on, and we would both go all the way back to the property line. There is an easement in the back that the church doesn't own, so we would never have contact with that back street behind the church property. It would suit our needs as far as fitting the central office building there, having the appropriate parking, speaking about being able to possibly add some community center areas and the art gallery into that building. The property is big enough to do that. There is a market value on that property. The market value is approximately $400,000 to $450,000. Next steps would be, we have Veronica working on a timeline with Gercio regarding backing out if you were interested in making an offer or looking to purchase either one of those properties, the timeline that we would need to be completed by in order to get it on the ballot, because the community would have to vote for you to purchase the property. If you wanted to make an offer on one of those properties, we could have a discussion about an offer. We can work with our real estate agent and making an offer, and then it would follow the typical guide that purchasing any property would be for an individual, except that the church is required to go through the Attorney General regarding appropriate market value, and they have to approve the sale price because they're protecting property being sold at too low of a monetary amount or too high of a monetary amount. So if we wanted to, and the board wanted to make an offer on either one of those properties, the one on Deer Park Avenue would not go through the Attorney General because that's a private owner. The other one, we would have to make an offer with the church. We would have to negotiate with the church till they decided on a price that they were satisfied with, and then that would need to be approved by the Attorney General for them to sell that property at that price.
What's the phase of the bond that you're building, administration building?
So with the new rephasing, it's not this summer, it's not next summer, it's the summer after that. So 23, 20, it's 25. Am I correct with that, Frank?
Correct.
2025?
Correct. So there's potential.
It was moved all the way to the end because we wanted to ensure with current inflation that everything put in there for students was completed. So that was the important part. So we are about costing out, and we will be towards the end soon of looking at phase 4 and looking at what we spent in this current phase versus what was budgeted to get an idea. We have been running on budget all the way up till this point, till phase 4. So we haven't gone over budget. There may have been a phase where we were under, and then in the next phase we were a bit over, but we're right on schedule or right on budget currently in our bond. Remember, the EPC, the Energy Performance Contract, integrates into the bond, and it's why some of the work was shifted because of the Univent work that gets tied into the Energy Performance Contract. So it would be impossible for us to do all the buildings Univents and the EPC in the same summer, so they would split out over 2 years so that we could integrate the EPC into the work with the Univents that are going in. So there's a lot of moving pieces here. I think the timeline for the property, or deciding whether you wanted to secure a property or abandon that idea, I think that's kind of the point where we're at now, that if we're going to make a decision to buy a piece of property, the board would need to come to consensus to move forward with that property so that we can begin that process now. Or you could make a decision to say, we want to wait a year, but if you wait till next year, then if you're doing it off-site, I don't know what properties will be available, and you would have to make that purchase, make sure it passed, because by the time all that paperwork and everything is done, you'll be already submitting to the state, because you would have to submit based on that property and how you're building the structure there. So the timeline is, if you're not going to do it now, off-site, you must do it next year if you're going to do it off-site. Yep.
Yeah, so that is one of the options too, is to revisit some of the on-site opportunities that we did have. I think, me personally, I would like to revisit that myself as well. Again, I'm just concerned in buying this property today that we won't be using for, some period of time, especially with concerns of budgeting, UPK program, other concerns that we have. The high market value right now at this point in time. So for me personally, I'm not, if we're going through that now, I'll just say my first piece is, I'm a little concerned about purchasing a property or making a decision to purchase a property now. That's just my opinion. Does anyone else want to chime in on that? Pros, cons, moving forward, not moving forward?
The issue of Glenn's made it is there is not a lot of open property available in North Valley. Right? So we want to build off properties. That's the census that the building committee was given to look off property. There was not a lot of properties around available for us to even look at that would accommodate building that we need. So I think we need to pretty quickly come to a consensus. There is property available in-house. And again, there was a consensus that the building committee was working on this. That certainly would not require us to go out and spend a couple $100,000 on these properties.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that shift happened. So I don't know if it happened at the building committee level or not, but we will always, we still have plans of, thinking about it in a few locations on site. Yeah, I don't know if that directive came from the board directly to the building committee or not.
Well, I think Bob's saying the building committee's consensus review was to recommend to the board on board site, right?
Well, that was one of the things, when we started this process, we had a couple of on-site options that the board was not in favor of for a number of reasons. One was that the high school was too crowded and bring it there. There was a lot of concern with traffic and safety. There was Belmont, and there was concern that it's on the edge of Belmont and not inclusive of, majority of where we are. So there's not a lot of other in-house property from what I remember from what we originally did.
Yep. Well, that's why I mentioned revisiting. That's why I said revisiting those things.
I could, and I'm sorry, I guess just to clarify, I thought that it was actually, all of those ideas were still on the table, and we wanted all of the numbers in order to make a better educated decision based on the prices that we had. We couldn't really make it moving forward because we didn't have the prices. So I don't think we were taking it off, from what I understood. We weren't taking it off the table. We didn't want to take it off the table until we had a price. And then we would have the discussion moving forward. And I think Belmont was one of them. We did the pros and cons, but we didn't have a price point. So I think that's what we'd like to, well, I know for myself, maybe some shared settlements, that we'd like to have the prices first before the purchase. Just moving forward. I don't know.
What's the deadline for budget?
Doug, would you be able to give some insight if the board wanted to put a purchase of a property on May's ballot, do you have an idea of like the official, you know, posting, the official, all the, like the timeline, like how soon would they need to make a decision?
I would say probably over the course of the next month or so. Yeah. But we can certainly give you a tighter time.
Right.
Yeah.
Just as an estimate, about a month.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
If I had to make a decision tonight, I would not be in favor of purchasing property. I would be looking at going on site.
Can we set up a meeting so we can discuss all this before that, in case we do go for buying the piece of property? Because like Bob said, there is no property out there, there's 3 pieces of property like that. And it doesn't come out of our budget, it comes out of our bonds. It's not a bond, it's not a budget purchase. But we approve this money out of the bond, we just have to approve spending it to buy the property, correct?
Yes.
So, you know, we should make a decision, we, you know, have a special meeting and decide.
The original bond that went up for vote, that got voted upon, wasn't to purchase property.
No, it was allowed $6 million for administration bill. And that money would come out of the $6 million in administration bill.
Yeah. Any other?
That was on site RGB.
But,
That was the presentation, right?
Yeah, well, and there's strong consensus, I think, from everyone on the board that we don't want to put
No, that was
an
consensus.
administrative building there. So that, you know, whether that was the original presentation or not, I think we decided no.
And I think there was a conversation about how Belmont property almost creates the same circumstance because of which side of the property you put it on. You have houses directly across from that property as well. So I think we were also entertaining the high school where behind the West Gym area that I gave you guys the drawings, where you would actually, you know, the grass area behind the concession stand would become parking lot. The building would be kind of where the asphalt and the hoops are. And then there would be some kind of hallway connecting that went around to the main hallway of the high school and having the area there. So I think at this point, if you're really looking for an option that doesn't disrupt the neighborhood, it would be the high school. And if you're looking for an off-site, it would be the church property. As far as price points, I think, like Dan had said, there's $6.1 million in the bond for the administration building. If you purchase property, I'm making these numbers up, and you spend $300,000, you then have $5.8 million for the building and the demolition for the rest of the construction, because that $300,000 came out of the $6.1 million. If you did it on site, you would have the $6.1 million to do the building and whatever costs that were associated at the high school, and then determine whether what that cost is. We're not in a place though, and I don't know if this is what you were asking for, Keisha, to really cost out the cost of the building, because that is, like architecturally, like the architects now are working feverishly to get in the art rooms for next year, like the timelines of the way the bond works as far as projects that are detailed to that amount, that kind of level of detail. The detail that was put in the budget was approximately an 8,000 to 9,000 square foot building that would cost approximately $6.1 million. And that's how the bond was created. Then it's almost like every other project. Like for example, 1.2 million was put in for the auditorium renovation. And then you back yourself into that number, and you may change things as you go along, because the lighting and the rigging was more expensive now because of inflation, so we had to change the flooring. Like, I'm making that up, that's not true. Everyone, it's not true. But that's what I'm saying. So you have the 6.1 million. You have to decide whether you wanted to spend any of that to buy a property and reduce the amount you have to do the building, or do you want to just leave that whole and look at doing it on a site such as the high school?
I think the high school would be the only site, because when we had the bond committee meeting, did they decide not to do Belmont? That's all.
No, we wanted Belmont.
But no, when the bond went up, it was moved over to Jardine Place. That's where the building was built.
The issue at Belmont was the central APPR room that was going to be in the middle between the two buildings, and we said we couldn't do that. But I think we still wanted to, you know, my memory was.
But how did that had we moved
conversation
to the
about
site over
There was
MGB.
conversation, yeah, but there was conversation that they didn't want the building, the administrative building for the district to be on the edge of the district.
Yes, that was. I didn't understand.
Well, we should have, I think we need to just.
Yeah, 'cause that's an interesting standpoint, only because if you have students at the school, it doesn't matter that one edge, the other edge, or dead smack in the middle. You service those students.
I agree with you.
I don't think I was there for that conversation.
No.
Yeah, I wasn't there.
No, that was before, yeah.
That's all right.
Honestly, that was probably during the construction of the bond.
Yeah.
Jeff.
So, I just want to say, I definitely wasn't part of it, as Ms. Rivers mentioned. I would need more information. I think I said at the last meeting, my ideas are always a little wacky, like, I don't know if we still have opportunity to include something in the design of this building. Like if I don't know what I mentioned last time, maybe a STEM center, but even if we were going to build a central office and have a commercial kitchen for students on the bottom, something to me that could make me excited about the multi-use of it. I would be interested if that's still possible. I think I need to be part of a conversation so that I can know where we are and what we are allowed to do based on what was voted for. I don't have that
So
information.
you are permitted to build spaces within there, right, as a board. So the community votes on the board's ability to spend the money on an administration building. That design comes from you guys, similarly to when you're approving the auditorium designs or what was in our cosmetology, right? The community didn't vote that we were going to have 3 stations or 4 stations or, sinks. They said, yes, we're going to say yes to a cosmetology studio for $800,000. And then the design team went through the building committee who made recommendations to the board, and we had approvals to build it the way it is. So you have the ability to have discussions about putting spaces within there that you can afford within the amount of money that was allocated. We've had discussions about that because we talked about science research or a STEM room within our administration building. When we had our last conversation, the building committee, when we were at the church, we actually talked about adding space possibly for our life skills program in that building because there may be space to have activities of daily living in there because we would house the food pantry. They could be a part of that, as well as you could almost build a fictitious apartment in there where kids learned activities of daily living in an area where they could come from the high school because it's directly down the road. And we talked about possible STEM and STEAM labs or a science research area because we've been having issues in that area. So we've had discussions, and I think that would come more to decide where you want to put it, and then we can decide what's in it. And we can have all that conversation here and look at the number and work with the architect building backwards, saying, hey, we've also discussed, which wasn't in the original conversation, putting in a boardroom where it maybe would sit 50 people with a boardroom table in that building so that you guys have a central location for executive session and for your board meetings. And then during large meetings like the June meeting where we do tenures and you go to the auditorium, but your regular meetings such as this, you could hold in a boardroom that's attached to central office.
So Glenn, if we built it on a high school property and we had a hallway connecting to the school building, and we had some of these areas in there, would that be then considered an extension of the school building, and therefore we can get some funding on it instead of having $6 million that's unfunded?
Right, so those were the questions that I have to ask the architect about, and we did in our last meeting, and I haven't spoken to him since, but we were running into issues with that ideology when looking at building the bus garage, because we were going to put a student conference center in there, like a video distance learning center in there. And they told us that the state would never approve, they're gonna see through that you're just trying to get need on the space. But it doesn't mean that if we build or wherever we build, if, like you said, a connected hallway, does that help? If we put a student center in there, does that help? I can ask those questions.
Especially if we put like an art gallery in a sort of pseudo STEM center, or I love the
I like the special ed.
art, I love what you said,
Yeah.
special ed, what's it?
Life skills.
Yeah, for the life skills program.
That's a home run. If you can do that in the middle and then have your
it's deciding where you want to go, getting the answers. Is there anything we can do when we build that space that would add funding or state aid reimbursement for it, which would give us more money to spend, right? So if you have $6 million to spend and you're getting 65 cents on the dollar, your money goes much further, right? So I can ask those questions, and Frank, Matt, and I will work together and work with Jim, our architect. And then if you want to schedule a meeting between now and the next one to have maybe those answers, to have another conversation about this, then you can make some final decisions about what you want to do.
Veronica, can we set that up to poll the board on dates available?
Parking, when you talk to the auction, parking also.
Yeah, why do we need to know whether we can put, an apartment in there or duck lab stuff? Why do we need to know that before we work on where we're going to build? We're 2 years out from building it. We have time to figure that out. We're having problems just figuring out where to build it.
I was just asking because if it's connected to a school building, then therefore maybe it could be hateable. That was my main question for having it at the high school. So I don't think building some of those things in an off-site location would allow it to be hateable. At least I don't know. That's why I'd be asking when to ask.
Yeah, I would have to ask that if we were able to put a space in that building off-site, is that different than connecting it with a hallway on-site, and would we have aid if it's connected to the hallway? Or as long as you have the space, you get aid on that particular size of space? So I'll ask those questions.
Cool. And then we could set up a meeting and take it further and have a little bit more detailed conversation. We need? Yeah. So the next topic was board training. We had sent a survey out to the board members. Training that we were going to have in February due to COVID. Anyway, we had 5 of the 7 board members that answered it. So we're going to move to have a training in March because we can't have it in February because of time right now. There has been some, we have to put new dates out. So we're going to have Veronica ask for new dates for March. And we will be setting up a training. The request was for a 4-hour training, and the topics to be discussed have been given. We'll talk about those again because there was some variations between everyone. So we'll have that conversation. Maybe we can have that conversation when we have the building meeting conversation as well. Energy contract, not sure what that was about. Glenn?
Yeah, so I think somebody asked to put that on to kind of see like where are we regarding the energy performance contract. So after we had them present, we re-met with the energy performance contract, ESG, I'm sorry, ESG. Matt has been going through the contract explicitly looking at language, terms, conditions, and we've also really have been looking at what's coming to our attention more and more over is the condition and lifespan of our boilers in our schools. So we have been shifting our focus to boiler replacement in this energy performance contract, along with utilizing some of the federal stimulus money and allowing, we talked about air conditioning being a part of it, so we're trying to blend those two ideas into a final energy performance contract that would include the necessity of these new boilers, which is about 5 boilers. We told them that we cannot use any Federal Reserve money in the EPC because when the new regulations came out regarding the Federal Reserve money, they changed what you were allowed to use it for. So remember, we were going to use $1.5 million of federal stimulus into the energy performance contract. We can no longer do that. That's why we had to remodel this energy performance contract scope of work. ESG is in the process of realigning that scope of work. I think that we need to, me, Frank, and Matt, meet with them to see where we're at regarding that final scope of work. And then they need to come back to the board. Probably relatively soon, like be at our next meeting, our next planning meeting. Well, February we have just a regular. I'm going to invite them to that meeting because if we want to stay on a timeline to integrate this into our UNIMED work, we have to get going with the energy performance contract.
So I'll invite them back in February. We'll do our interim meetings between them to make sure they're presenting the scope of work that we now recommend based on Federal Reserve money coming out, hitting some of these targets with spoilers, and we'll re-present in February to you guys.
Cool. All right. Any questions on that? Good. Indoor safety protocol for sporting events. There was a question about that.
Yeah, just wonder, I know we're going into the second season of winter sports, and I know unfortunately, a few weeks ago, or a week or so ago, there was an incident. Just revisiting, is there anything that we need to do differently, or to make sure that it's followed through for the procedure, just so moving forward, reflectively looking at this, that we don't have, just become a pattern, or just the
We're not inviting that school here anymore, no. So in evaluating the process and protocols, when we looked at our opening plan with spectators, we always try to have like a home and away, and it says whenever possible. What happens in that smaller gym on that side, the bleachers don't open as big or as wide as they do in the west gym. So what happens is, depending on how many people come, you may see people blending from our side into the visitor side, or vice versa, because they're not as big as an area. I haven't been to a JV basketball game yet, so I haven't seen what that looks like. But I don't know if that was the occurrence that happened there. I know that Jason is aware of trying to allocate a home and away. The middle school is aware like a home side and an away side. Talking about, again, household members, mass, 2 spectators per athlete. So those protocols will be reviewed, and we'll try to make sure that if it can happen that way, it will. And if there's too many people from one particular side, we may have to blend depending on which area or space is being used.
I think it's just definitely worth like a revisit, discussion, just to make sure, because of course, if anything happens that isn't conducive to the safety of, our population, and we just do something collectively in order for it not to happen again. Because, I mean, just FYI, I know that the basketball team, it was very clear for 8th grade basketball, they separated. And I don't know if that was the issue, because I wasn't necessarily there, but from what I heard, there was a lot of intermingling, and not saying that that might have led to it, but just moving forward, so we just don't have to be.
Yeah, and really those rules of home and away aren't rules that we have consistently. It's a COVID rule really to kind of keep parents of each team on separate sides. That really hasn't been a rule that we follow home and away. It kind of naturally happens at the varsity level in general when you go to a game indoors like basketball, because usually when we're non-COVID, the student section's up there in the top right corner, and we try to use separate entrances and exits for safety purposes. Having the gate, you can get the names in the gate sheet. So I'll speak to Jason again, and at the middle school we're hitting the winter season 2, and within the next, I'm going to say 3 to 4 weeks, we'll be wrapping up the winter sessions at the high school going into playoffs. So I'll speak to them.
Any other questions by any board members? Good. Okay, so this is a section of the meeting with public participation. As mentioned before, a section of the agenda gives the Board of Education opportunity to recognize residents who wish to raise a question or make a brief statement on matters including but not limited to agenda items. The time available will be 5 minutes for each person. And again, we're going to request for today to just speak from your seat, name your name and location, and take it from there. So, question? Kathy?
Kathy Shy, I will give you my address, it's on record. Going back to moving CO, if you chose the high school, how much will that mess up the work that we already had done there? I mean, those fields are beautiful now. How are you going to fit that in there?
So it
we
would
just have
fit,
all that
the
work
way I
done?
see the design, Kathy, is that the asphalt that wasn't replaced right outside the gymnasium where the locker rooms exit onto that pavement where the basketball hoops are.
Like the blacktop area?
The blacktop area, that wasn't replaced.
Okay.
That would be the area of the building. And then where the 2 tennis courts were, that's just grass behind
Okay,
the concession stand.
okay,
That was just seed and not sod.
okay.
So it wouldn't disrupt any other area because we would still use that middle gate to be
Okay.
the road in, and that would still be our access point for emergency vehicles to hit the roads that would travel along the high school.
Okay, and then if you were gonna go that way, I mean, I know there was concerns from board and members for other things that came up about strangers in the building, outside people in the building, so how are you gonna cut, you know, there's a lot to think about with that, and I understand the concern, and I really appreciate you wanna save us money, but the church is gonna sell that property to somebody else. And it sounds like we have a small window of opportunity right now to get it on, like, we have to stop talking about it and make a decision, because the church is gonna sell that property to somebody else. And I don't wanna look back and say, you know, we should have done that, because that seems to be the perfect thing. It helps the church, it helps the community, it can help the life skills program by connecting it to the ministry at St. Paul's, and it's central to the community. And I understand about the money, but we have to make a decision on this. We have been talking about CO since the bond days, and I can't even say, when did we start that? I think Christina was still in high school.
2016.
And she's now out of college. So we need to get moving on this. It's like a constant circle. That building for CO, it has to go. It's dangerous. MGB needs the parking. We need to make a decision, whether it's going to be the high school or whether it's going to be buying that property. My concern is that the church knows they can sell that property now, and we're going to lose out on that property. Thank you.
Mrs. Pavolino, I know that you had stood up before.
Yes.
Now would be the time if you want to speak now.
No, he wanted to talk to you.
Oh, okay.
I was giving him out. Do you want to talk? Okay. Thank you. Do I need to do the address thing again? Okay.
No, we got it.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Here's my concern. Grades 6 through K do not have live streaming. And from what we saw in 2020, that simple Google Classroom assigning assignments is not an education. Kids fall behind. And when you have special ed kids that are in this situation that need the teacher instruction, even if it's listening to them, or giving a parent a chance to be able to watch with their child what is going on in the classroom, to follow along with their learning so we can help them. I really fail to understand how this can possibly go on. And we only allow it from 7 to 12. But we can talk about spending money and increasing other programs, but this is a fundamental thing. Our kids are falling behind educationally as it is. And I understand that you guys cannot tell New York State regions, hey guys, our kids are a year behind or 6 months behind. We can slow the curriculum down, because that's really what they need. You have kids that started out in kindergarten when this thing started, and yet they're behind. My 9th grader is behind in math by a chunk, and she's struggling now because she had Algebra 1 in 9th grade, now she's got Algebra 2 in 11th, and it's a gap. But teachers are expected to keep the same curriculum. So I really need to know what is going to be done to help our children, especially our kids who are special needs, who are in ICT programs, who have reading programs. I personally was fortunate enough, Mr. Rodero himself called my house twice. I emailed pictures to him of the questions, and he went over it with my son. Because the way you guys teach math today is not how we learned it. So when I'm telling him, no, this is how you do it, no, Mom, you can't do it this way. So I can't even help him because it's not what's being taught the way it is today. Mrs. Reynolds, she reached out and helped him. Ms. O'Sullivan reached out and helped him. These are teachers that went on their own time to help our kids. I need to know what you guys are going to do to help our kids, especially when they're quarantined.
We had an amazing quarantine plan for education for our students who were going to be quarantined or isolated that drastically and quickly fell apart because of the number of positive staff members and the amount of coverages that we were doing within the school district. So we were topping 117 to 120 professionals out a day since the January break. Prior to that, we had teachers who were signing up to teach after school home instruction by subject, by grade, but did not have those people to do it because they were ending up teaching 8 periods out of 8 periods in a day or were ill themselves. Recently, I've been working with the MBTO president, Ms. Kathy Dean, on a plan of live streaming grades 5 and grade 6, with a plan of having that implemented on January 31st, beginning in grades 5 and 6. It's not about money, so it's not really comparing like adding services and not, because it's not an expense. It's ensuring that the camera and the streaming equipment is set up properly, that where is the camera placed in the room compared to where the computer is placed, do we have the proper cords, and do we have the proper microphones for those rooms, because those rooms didn't do streamed instruction like this grade 7 through 12 did when we were on the hybrid.
Okay.
So now we're evaluating our grade 5 and 6 classrooms right now. We have our 2 instructional technology teachers who do work with our staff doing professional development, and we're going to be launching on January 31st the ability to stream in if you are isolated or quarantined due to COVID-19 starting on January 31st.
Well, why are we doing it so late when this pandemic's been going on for 2 years?
Because it wasn't necessary to do it when we had the home teaching and when we were on a hybrid. So 6th grade, it was an all virtual program last year, or you were in person.
Right.
So the kids who needed streaming were home and had the ability to do that. We ran a 7 through 12 live stream program because kids were in cohorts coming to school. Half kids were home watching while half were in school.
Okay.
The elementary program, we were able to secure a full remote program with remote teachers that reduced the class size, that we didn't teach or educate our teachers on streaming in their room, and what that instruction looks like and how does that happen. So now we're in the process of making sure the equipment's correct in that classroom, because no one ever expected Omicron to come the way it did. You can't think ahead or plan for a pandemic in the way that things have changed so significantly. And when I say significantly, I mean there was a 180% increase in absenteeism compared to last year. The infection rate is significant. We were hitting 28, 30% in Suffolk County. Last year, our highest rate of infection was 10%. We were having 6,500 infections a day, where last year we were having less than 2,000 infections a day. Omicron brought in a change so quick on the tails, and just so you know, I was out for over 2 weeks. So in the span where several central office administrators were COVID, administrators, teachers, and we're trying to cover classes so kids can continue to come to school, we ran out of bus drivers and we were doubling up bus runs. We had to cut certain bus routes. So we are responding to the way the pandemic is shaping in front of us. You can't get ahead of something that you don't know what's ahead of you. So we thought our plan of this home instruction, 1 hour a day after school by subject, by grade, was going to be a great solution for quarantine kids, because that aligns to our home instruction plan for students who are ill. The problem is we had no teachers who could teach it after a while. It was started, people were doing it, and then they were either getting ill or they were covering classes all day and then didn't want to do it. And it came to a breaking point. And then in a system like ours, where there's 5,000 kids and 1,000 employees, things don't change overnight. So the planning that goes behind something like switching to streaming is conversations with the union leadership, conversations with the administration, meeting with the building principal, defining what equipment is in each room, doing a tech evaluation, which rooms need longer cords for the cameras, which don't, getting the professional developers in those rooms for those teachers that need the support, and then launch. And I have to say, we're getting it done in 6 work days. So when we were able to switch and we recognized, hey, we got to be doing more at this point, let's try to get this live stream into grades 5 and 6, where it's appropriate. I will never say that live streaming into a kindergarten class is appropriate, because live stream instruction where it's a passive experience, where you're streaming into a room and you're listening, like you said, where a parent, in kindergarten, there isn't that whole group type of instruction where a teacher is in the front of the room educating at long periods of time, because it's kindergarten. There tends to be small group, the teacher's moving around, you may not be able to hear, where is the camera facing? What we have asked our fifth grade teachers to do is, look at your daily plan for the day. What lessons will be whole group? Your math lesson, maybe your social studies lesson, maybe your science lesson, and maybe, another lesson. Those that you would teach to the whole class at the same time, you're going to stream and you're going to make sure that somebody can listen in. The worksheets and the classwork will be on the Google Classroom so that you can have them at home. And then if you're doing independent reading or conferencing or benchmarking, the camera wouldn't be on because it would be a silent time in the room. So we are piloting going to 6th grade runs like 7th, 8th. They just never streamed before because they had a full remote program. So that will be similar to the kid will follow their schedule, except there would be no phys ed stream. There would be an asynchronous phys ed where there's an assignment.
Right.
But you would stream into home and careers, you would stream into tech, so that would happen. In the elementary school, it would just be the core teacher and those lessons in math, reading, social studies, science that are taught whole group. And when we're successful there, if we feel that we could look at a 4th grade, we would. I'm very cautious in a K-3 stream for a day where that type of instruction looks so different in a classroom and isn't conducive to the type of passive live streaming that we're speaking about.
And what about the special ed kids? Are we able to do anything to
Yeah, so special ed kids, so we have. So there have been students who have had specialized reading on their IEP, where if it's one-on-one reading, and it's, I'm going to use your example, Ms. Reynolds, and it's period 3 every day, one-on-one, she's able to stream and do that service because she doesn't have any other students in her class. So she could, if it's a one-on-one reading service.
No, I'm even saying for the younger grades as well.
For any special ed student that has a specialized service on their IEP,
Correct.
we will look to try to provide that as a virtual option.
Okay.
And we actually had a conversation today, Ms. Manzi and I, about ensuring we have makeup sessions for any sessions that were missed regarding any related service that's on an IEP. So we've had so many, even co-teaching teams where one is out and the other's in, and we've had related service people out. We were using E&L and speech teachers to cover classrooms. So services needed to be stopped because there were no classroom teachers to have the kids come into a 3rd grade class or a 4th grade class. So we were really holding things together during this point. We are seeing significant improvement in both our student attendance was all the way down in the low 70%, and now our student attendance is about 92%, and our staff attendance went from approximately about 117 to around 41 today. So we're seeing significant improvement, which tells me we're going to hit a consistent road again, and I hope that the new rules for quarantine being shortened to the 5 days and who gets quarantined. So you're only quarantined now if you're ill or you're unvaccinated. So and other than that, if you have no symptoms, you're no longer required to quarantine. So those were the new guidelines that I put out, I believe, a week or so ago. They're on the website. So we should see a reduction in the amount of kids that are at home, hopefully, because hopefully people aren't getting sick.
Correct.
And if they are, if they're too sick to stream in, we can look at a plan, and I would urge every parent to work with the building principal or the special ed department to make sure whatever services or supports needed when they return, that the students receive those.
Well, that's my other question too. When the kid who is on who is in an ICT class, and they're paying to be out for whatever it is, 5 days, 10 days, whatever the case may be, when they go back into school, to real school, to expect them to be able to perform on a test in 2 or 3 days, or be caught up with everything.
No, so that really is a teacher conversation. So I would expect that.
But the teacher says it's across the board. That's the only reason why I'm asking. Apparently, the curriculum is the curriculum. It's going to move, regardless of what student
So maybe I can help with some of the conversations and work with Ms. Manzi, because my answer to that is, if you're in a co-taught classroom, part of the responsibilities are individualized education plans for students with IEPs, and if a student's out, when they come back in, having the special educator in there, that special educator should be able to pull a small group or a child to work on skills that were missed during that absence, and delay the exam, the test, the quiz,
Right.
the book report until the child is ready and has the opportunity to digest and learn the material. So that will be a conversation that I'm able to have with Ms. Manzi that I can speak to the principals about.
Okay.
Because I do not believe that if somebody who's out on a 5 or a 7 day illness comes back, and if there's a unit test 2 or 3 days later, there is no way in the 9 days of instruction and the student got the last 2 that they are prepared for an assessment. The idea of assessment is to get engaged on what a student learned. If we're assessing a student who wasn't there for 7 days, we're actually taking an assessment on things that they weren't taught.
Correct.
So we already know what ones they would not be successful in. So that has to be a mindset shift that I will work on with special education and the teachers. And I also urge any parent who has that conversation with the teacher regarding like a test a day or 2 after a return to speak to the teacher and speak to the teacher about exactly what you said. You know, my child was out for 5 days, there's no way they're prepared. And if the answer is, well, I have to give the test that day, then I would reach out to the building principal to have a conversation.
I don't know about your outcome, but that's not just from my own experience too, that's not just the special ed situation. That's going on throughout the district. So kids that are quarantined and going back to school are expected to take that test when they go
Yes,
back.
right here, my kid went back 1 day and had a test.
That's personal experience, which I usually don't speak about, so.
So this is the first time I'm hearing that. So I have to go and work in a more systemic way and speak to the building administrators and have a conversation. So I will do that, and I appreciate you sharing tonight so that I can look into those things.
And a suggestion would be, because I want to be part of the solution. I don't want to be the nagging person. If the students at the high school, for example, they need community service hours, if there's a way to do a Google live stream or FaceTime or some means of using them to help the younger ones to formulate, to teach what they know, what they learned that we as parents don't know. That would be a great way to get them the hours they need and support them the younger grades need. Because the younger grades are having, I'm not saying the older grades aren't having a hard time, but the younger grades are really having a difficult time, especially because they're not live streaming and the whole 9 yards.
There may be something that we could look at as far as like an after school, something where parents could sign up, the elementary parents,
Yes.
with an honor society or a student at the high school with a permission form. Because I always get concerned about the technology connection through FaceTime or through Google Meet with a student and a younger student, and us being responsible for that interaction. So it would really need to be, again, teacher supervised, where the high school kids are in a particular area being supervised by a teacher, and the student could be at home, the younger student, but we could formalize it in a way it really couldn't be us connecting two people and say, hey, 3rd period you have off and Johnny's at home, can you go into the library and stream with him on this math? Because the accountability of what that interaction looks like could be troublesome. So I'll work on with the high school principal and see if there's some type of strategy that we can employ that's similar to that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just got something. Is this on?
Yes.
Is there a way, like, this pandemic screwed up education all over the country, and we hear that kids are behind all over the country in education. Is there a way that we can evaluate somehow where our children are? If the reading program needs more assistance, or the science program, where do we fit on that?
Yeah, so we do every year. So we use universal benchmarks. They're given in the fall, the winter, and the spring. We're in the middle right now of our winter benchmark. It's grades K to 8. So we'll have math and reading scores on every student in the district, K to 8. We'll see where they started in September, where they are currently now, and it's normed nationally. So we would be able to see, there's also actually a white paper document, research paper, that Star Renaissance provided us, which is the company that we use their platform for our assessment, on the effects of learning on scores on these assessments. So I can provide a presentation on that, and I would love to maybe come like March or April, where we have all of our screening. Actually, Ms. Gillen just put an appointment on my calendar. I saw today that I'm meeting to review all the winter screenings with the directors I think next week, I saw it on my calendar.
At the end of January, the window closes, and
Right.
what I saw on your calendar was that I got this news story this month off the other day, that we were going to do a preliminary read of all the data and come to you with recommendations based on what we see in the winter data of where we think we need to adjust for the spring for K-8 and reading and math. But as far as the other students falling behind, that's a term I try not to use, because if every child in the whole world fell behind, then nobody's behind. We just have to readjust and
Well, we should be.
where kids are at and scaffold to get them up, which is a lot of the work, and Crystal and I just looked at it, a lot of the work that we've been doing as with directors in working with teachers and helping them adjust their mindset shift, that they're stop talking about facts. We just need to readjust. And scope and sequences were adjusted to assist, and in fact, when we came back from December break, Mr. Eschbach and I met immediately with concern about the January midterm exams, and immediately met with groups and said, we need to cancel our January midterms in the secondary because of the number of kids that we're seeing that are absent and the number of teachers. There's no way that we're going to have every kid prepared for that, and we feel we need to recapture those days as instructional days. To do just that is to capture time to look for gaps and give everybody a chance to breathe and recalibrate themselves. So the directors have been working very closely with their teachers, but obviously we have some teachers we've got to go back and we talk to about those adjustments and assisting them with the shift.
And
It's difficult
at the
for
February
teachers.
meeting, Kathy's going to be speaking to the board about Regents exams. I know she's also, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kathy, you're interested in even your advocacy to the state regarding the June Regents exams because of student absenteeism, staff absenteeism. I provided Kathy a report that I also gave to the two buildings, the middle school and high school, and I have to say, I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, but I was alarmed at the significant difference of absenteeism this year as even compared to last year, where I said 100 and something more % of kids were absent in the month of October than last year, where we had some close to 2,000 absentee incidences in 1 month, grades 8 through 12. And these kids are in Regents courses. So Kathy's putting together a presentation sheet, because remember we had spoke about her coming and presenting the board for February. So that'll be a part of our conversation as well. So I think it'll be a great time to discuss where are our kids and Kathy's ideas that she wanted to share with the board.
And while we're discussing where are we, I know it's a big thing, I hear from a lot of reading. Reading's a big problem. You know, we need more reading specialists that we have to hire. I mean, we should just look into, I mean, if you can't read, you can't do anything. That's what they, I'm not an educator, but that's what I'm told, but that's a focus that we should really.
And I have to say, that's part of the reason why we scheduled this meeting with Len, to see if there's a recommendation of whether or not we need to make some adjustments. But I will tell you, principals have been coming to me with creative ideas and suggestions that they'd like to implement that are completely out of the box and nothing we've ever done before to try to remediate. I haven't even had a chance to, Glenn's hearing this for the first time because I haven't had a chance to even talking about it, but some of the.
Well, we should hear before him anyway.
But I will, the reason why I say that is because it means that teachers and principals are really working on it and aware and are trying to find a solution to fix it. But again, with so much absenteeism, a group met to discuss it, and then all of a sudden that teacher's covering a class for the week, so it's just been taking us just a little bit longer to kind of get it off the ground, and we want to make sure that it's meaningful work and that it's impactful. That just takes a little time to put together, but it is definitely something that is on the radar, and it was one of the things that Crystal talked about earlier with the cultural proficiencies. Everything Crystal does in social studies at the elementary is in line and works with the ELA director, because she wants to make sure if you're going to read a book about the history that's in the curriculum, I also want it to be valuable for reading, so we don't lose the social studies curriculum, but we can work on it. So Crystal makes sure that we're really looking at every way we can weave in reading, that we are.
Very good. Thank you.
One of the concerns, of course, has been there has been so many days where we've needed to cancel math support and reading support services because we needed those teachers in classroom because of how short we are. So as we build back now, we are getting back to higher attendance rates. I've also have the principals at the elementary level now providing me daily
anytime they needed to pull an AIS or a reading teacher for a period, a half a day, or a full period being provided to me through a Google Sheet so that I can get an understanding of how many times that's happening due to absences and how much services our kids who need those services are missing.
After school spring academy for K-5 will start again after the winter screener. So that's a program that we've been running for the last, we didn't run it last year, obviously, that we've run it in the past the last couple of years to provide extra support after school for kids that have been identified by teams and not in their buildings. So what they'll do when the winter screener is over, they will calibrate and create new groups, and then they'll have these after school groups. And principals would love to maybe run some additional sections of that, but again, we have an issue with, the staff is exhausted. And we're just, completely.
And I think one of the things actually was recommended by Ms. Seeley is that we want to run these, but we can't run them at 12 and 15 students after school. So we have teachers that are exhausted that, doing that extra time, they're not interested right now, but I also think then we need to target the 4 or 5 per grade level instead of placing so many students in per grade level. We talked about revisiting the actual framework that we developed years ago, so we're going to be doing that as well.
Does that include the speech level?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Everyone here knows how to examine you. Do your budget dates? Are they on the calendar?
They are on the calendar. The budget meeting dates are on the calendar.
Okay, and did we get a preliminary age number from the state? Is this us on the
Yeah.
district?
Last night, I believe last night, that sometimes I'm losing them. We have an increase of about $1.6 million overall.
Go ahead, buddy.
And I was one of the students who had to learn Sundays, right? And it was super hard and difficult to do the work. I didn't understand anything or any work, if not learn anything. So I'm afraid that, and I also think that other students that were quarantined had to also did not understand what was going on and that was time. And my solution to this problem could be that you can message as the principal, their teachers and those teachers can go and their spare time and go on computers and create a Google Meet and they can send a message to you or the parent or the child's parents so that they're not on the Google Meet 80%. Well, if you go into Google Meet and then teach them virtually.
I think that's a great idea. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I apologize that you struggled during your time at home. And thank you for sharing that with us, okay?
That's what it's all about, folks, right there. Anyone else got any questions? Scott?
Just a question on the COVID-19 dashboard that is on the website. It is not updated daily, or is it just because there's been absences?
It's updated daily.
It's not updated daily. That's screenshots. They're the same numbers as 3H groups.
So,
And then if you look on the school report card, covid.gov. Yeah, if you look, it was, I think, the 14, 15, 16, or 16, or no,
just, it's
17,
right up the
16,
front.
It was 7 and 1, and then all of a sudden on.
So the dashboard from the county will not match ours?
No, I know that, but if you look at the dashboard from the county, it's only updated on the 13th, and it only updated on the 10th as well, which was when your numbers also updated. I wasn't sure if it was due to like staffing shortage or if it just wasn't updating, but when you see that it was 7 students and 1 staff member for 3 straight, you're like, well, that's not right.
Right, if it's the exact number of the same boxes, that's not correct.
Yeah. I did, because I was texting her, I'm like, am I crazy? Not that I'm not crazy, but I think. Yeah. But again, no, you do what you do, and then all of a sudden on the 13th, you had these huge numbers on the 13th.
The 13th was, so I can tell you what happened there is that they get reported from the school nurses. So the amount of students that came in over the period of time, the school nurse has to contact the parent. They handled it in the school management system. So sometimes they come over in bulk and may represent more than one day for a particular building. Because one day I went on the dashboard and I said to because my secretary does the dashboard, by the way. I said, oh my God, we had 27 kids at the high school have COVID today? And she said, no, there were so many over various days that they all came over on the same day, but they weren't positive on the same day.
So the 15th, 16th, and 17th, it shows 7 students at the high school and 1 student, one staff member from the high school. And the 15th, the 16th, and the 17th were all the same numbers in the same place.
So I think they all got reported in a bulk, and then the next time we got a report.
But it should have been reported on the 15th, and then the 16th should have shown nothing, and the 17th should have shown nothing.
I don't think, I'm going to say that it wasn't cleared out.
Okay.
That when nothing was added in that day, it wasn't cleared out.
I just asked for some clarification. I think there was a weekend as well in that time frame?
There was a weekend as well.
Yes, it definitely doesn't get input in on the weekends.
It used to clear out on the weekend, though. It used to zero out, though.
Only if we do it manually.
Yeah.
So that means my secretary didn't go in and clear it out.
Okay.
Because it's all manually done. It's a Google form.
Yeah, there was.
Yeah, the 14th was a snow day.
Yeah.
And I also just
And we
asked,
were off on the 17th from school Monday.
there was, the 14th wasn't the Sunday, it was the Friday. So the other thing I just want to add about the staff is that I may get on a Monday, or positive. I wait until I see verification of a test.
Okay.
So that is also what they contribute to a lag time.
Okay, so especially on a weekend where if someone says on Friday I tested positive, it doesn't show you the paperwork until Monday, everyone shows their Monday paperwork.
And so it could be like how inflated, or that there definitely could be a lag. But also now with the home reporting, people are telling us that they're home reporting, and they're reporting it to a different website for Suffolk County Department of Health. So we don't report those now to Suffolk County. They report them directly to Suffolk County. So those numbers may never align.
We're also getting, just so you know, I'll see on either student or staff absenteeism where it says sick, 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 and then on like the 3rd or 4th day, they finally had access to a test, and then the parent would call and say, oh, they were COVID positive, but the other days they would list it as sick, and then we say, when was the first day you had symptoms? And it could have been 2 or 3 days before that, and it changes the day that it's getting reported in our system. But it wouldn't make sense that it wouldn't, if nothing was being reported that day, we should really zero it out and then report the bulk the next time we receive it, because it's appearing as if each day 7 kids, like you're saying, 7, 7, 7, and you know that would be, if the same exact numbers in the same boxes multiple days is not accurate. Unless it stayed over a weekend period, and like on a Friday it was reported that way, and then we didn't have school Monday and Tuesday when we came in, it wasn't cleared out. It could have read that number all weekend without being cleared out. So I'll look into that, but reporting right now is going to be very difficult because the over-the-counter tests and self-reporting. So before you had to provide documentation of a COVID positive, either from a practitioner or a lab test. Now with the over-the-counter test, it's that attestation form in the Google form. So now the nurses go into the Google form, see what parent filled it out, because you're not really reporting your child with COVID. You're really saying to us, what day will my child come back? Because you're calculating your own return to school based on the new quarantine rules. So we're using that form and to say like date COVID positive, and we're pulling that date from the Google form.
Is there a strategic way that you could add another column? Like when you look onto the Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were saved, like necessarily saved.
I don't think that the data is saved. I think the sheet is repopulated with new numbers each time, and it's the same sheet up there, but it doesn't mean that we can't do additional tabs with dates on the bottom and have it be able to, somebody on our dashboard and look back. It may be only be able to start like next week being able to look back because we don't have the data specifically because in these sheets, but I can look into that. All right.
Any questions? We're going back to executive session. So we're going to look for a motion to adjourn the meeting? Motion Dan, second. Second.